We got a lot of work to do. All right. All right. Oh, you get all... Okay, you get back here. Now, today, we're going to be talking about Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. I'm going to grab my handy dandy notes here so I actually know what I'm talking about, and this video isn't 6 hours long. Okay. So, as some of you may guess, I said 5th edition. But don't be confused that this is not Vampire in the 5th edition D&D game setting. This is Vampire the Masquerade's own 5th edition of their own game, the D10 Vampire storytelling role-playing game. Sadly, we don't have a PDF for this one. We did not pre-order this one in time to get the free PDF, and we got the book here, but we have this fancy schmancy camera angle here. I'm going to move my notes to the side here. And then we'll be able to take a closer look at the book here. So when we need it, when we need that, we'll switch to that. First thing is, this is 5th edition. So for those of you who don't know, Vampire the Masquerade is a D10 role-playing game system. So there's no D20s, there's no D4s, D6s, the illustrious D12. You just roll D10s to figure out everything in the game. And Vampire the Masquerade is a game basically of different vampire clans. Some of them which you may know without really knowing that some of it actually came from this game. I'm your friendly Rules Arbiter Steve. I've been playing role-playing games for a fair number of decades at this point. I actually played the old 1st/2nd edition version of Vampire the Masquerade, and we're going to do a little bit of comparison to these two. Like I said, this is my old book. I sadly didn't get to play too much of this. I would love to have played more of the old system, but I did read a lot about it, and I did read a lot about the new 5th edition, the Behemoth. As you see, the size of these books, this one's the old version, and it's quite a bit smaller. But does it have less information? We're going to find out. I'm going to squirrel that away for a second over here. Now, as I already kind of mentioned a little bit before, Vampire the Masquerade is in the World of Darkness setting. World of Darkness encompasses a fair variety of those fantastical creatures, vampires being one of them, and their society and how they operate, along with Hunter, which we hopefully are going to be doing a review of. Jerry might be doing a review of that in the near future. So take a look for that video when it comes out. We have pre-ordered the Werewolf the Apocalypse, the new version of that game. And as just like in almost every single trope, vampires and werewolves, they generally don't get along too well. So hopefully stay tuned for that video too, and we'll definitely get the PDF. Actually, we already have the PDF for that, but I'm waiting for the physical book to come in because I'm an old person and I like physical books. That's the answer to that question. But I have started reading it already. So, what is all this business about Vampire the Masquerade? I believe it came out in the mid to late 90s as a different role-playing game than obviously the D&Ds and Pathfinder wasn't even in existence yet, and of those standard fantasy role-playing games where you take on a vampire in the more modern world. Well, modern for the 90s being modern when it came out. But obviously this game takes it into the present day, or as close to it as I think it goes into. I think it makes references of the 2000s or the 2018s. So for those of you who have not played a World of Darkness type game, or a game set in the World of Darkness, instead of the GM being the Game Master or the Dungeon Master, the Game Master in this game is called the Storyteller. Now, that's just a name. It doesn't really matter. It gets the same gist across. But the idea that the World of Darkness isn't just about slaying monsters, getting loot, and leveling up. It is more of a narratively focused and driven game. Now, that's not to say there isn't combat, but the World of Darkness is known for their more narratively focused, and combat is kind of like a last resort. You have to remember, you're a vampire. There's pretty guaranteed ways that you could just die. And the other vampires know about them too. And some of the other people in the world, most of the werewolves probably know how to take out a vampire. And also the hunters. And maybe the mages, if they ever come out with the mage book. And a lot of the other things. They know how to kill vampires. They know how to kill werewolves. If you're in the world, kind of like Blade, if you know about the secondary world of vampires, the world of darkness, you're going to have more information about, and you realize that you're basically walking around as Superman, like Superman, but everyone's walking around with a piece of kryptonite in their pocket. So you got to be careful of what you do and what you say and who you interact with and how you interact with them. So that's kind of the gist of the World of Darkness, the Vampire Masquerade game setting. We're going to go in a little bit more detail about that, but we're going to do that a little bit later. First things first, we're going to go into mechanics. So we're going to switch our handy dandy cam in here for a second. All right. So obviously this is the character sheet that comes in the book, and I'm not ever going to write on this, but there is one available online for free. But this just gives you a kind of a look at what the character sheet encompasses. And you're going to notice that it's a fair bit different than a lot of other characters. There's no numbers for your stats. There's 5 empty circles. And for your skills, there are 5 empty circles. And what does all this mean? Remember, I said that this is a D10 based system. So when it comes down to it, when you make your character, you're going to have a certain number of points to spend, and some of the choices you're going to make are going to tell you to fill out some of these pips. Now, whenever you are told to make a certain check, the DM is going to tell you, okay, well, I want you to make an athletics plus a strength roll. So if I have a 2 points in athletics and 2 points into my strength, I'm going to roll 4d10. And that's really how the game works, is you add up the number of pips, what the DM or the storyteller tells you to roll. Usually, generally, it's going to be one stat and one other thing. Generally, it's going to be one of these skills or disciplines. These are your vampiric magic powers. And you're going to go through, like I said, okay, you're going to, I want you to roll charisma, and I want you to roll etiquette. And okay, and then you go, okay, well, I have a 3 in charisma and a 3 in etiquette. I'm going to roll 6 dice. I have a lot of dice. So anytime you're rolling any checks, any roll of a 6 or better is considered a success. What the DM decides to do with the storyteller, we have so many different names for the same thing. Well, the storyteller, to determine the difficulty, the storyteller is going to tell you how many successes do you need to pass whatever you're doing. Lifting that car, holding a door open, closing that door on somebody, smooth talking somebody, using one of your magic powers to hide or do all your fancy magic vampire stuff. The DM's going to be okay, well, I want you to roll your potence and your strength. Potence is super strength, effectively. It's vampire powers, super strength. Okay, you're trying to rip a car door off of a car. You want to pick up back in the old, for those of you who played the card game, you want to pick up that sewer lid and chuck it against one of the other vampires. Well, that's going to be a potence roll plus your strength roll. And the DMs are like, well, it's kind of dark outside. We have a lot of these factors. We're going to make this a success a 4. You need 4 successes to accomplish your task. And you go, okay, well, I take my 2 strength die and my 4 potence dice and I roll them and I figure out what I got. And did I succeed? Did I fail? And in some cases, the DM will let you succeed with a cost if you didn't quite make it. Or fail with a great critical failure if you manage to not roll any successes whatsoever. There are methods of how you roll critical. Anytime you roll a 10, that dice can roll again and add to successes. To kind of it's like an exploding dice system. Anytime you roll 10s, you roll again, and you can possibly get more and more successes. So does this differ from the old version of the game? In a small way, it does. Because back in the old system, and it's really an arbitrary thing, the old system had the DM decide how many successes you need and what a success meant. Meaning that in the new game, you need a 6 or better. Doesn't matter what, the DM doesn't change. The storyteller doesn't change that. It's always a 6 or better on the D10s that counts towards a success. In this game, in the older versions of this game, the system was the DM would determine what die roll you needed to get a success. So maybe he said, okay, well, this is a little easier. So you need 3s to succeed, but you need 5 successes. So you need to get 3s on your dice, and you need to get at least 5 of them over a 3 or over. So to simplify that, this system basically said 6s are what you need. It's basically 50%, and the DM just decides on how many successes you need. But the DM can also decide. The DM can also decide on maybe the situation is at your disadvantage. Meaning that the situation is making it harder. You're trying to peer into the darkness, but it's foggy and rainy out, or you're trying to listen for something that's maybe hunting you, and it's, all that rain is causing lots of noise, or there's lots of traffic, or maybe there's some weird voodoo vampire magic clogging your senses and is making you more difficult. So the DM can choose to take away dice from your dice pool that you've collected. Now the DM, or maybe yourself, maybe have a perk or an ability, or maybe you can argue that there's some situational benefit in the area, and your GM or your storyteller may grant you dice. Or they may make the difficulty slightly less. Maybe they make it where instead of making 5 successes, maybe you say you need 4 or 3, and they can adjust that on the fly. So they don't have to worry about the odds of you rolling a 3 or 4 or 5. It's always 50%. It's always 6 or better. But the GM the storyteller does still have that ability to manipulate what you need and make it feel easier or harder based on what basically environmental factors, how many dice they have to take away, or maybe how many dice they add to you, or how many successes you need. So that really gets the feel of in other games where the monster has a 15 AC. Well, in this case, you just need 1 or 2 or 3 extra successes, or maybe their armor is making it harder for you to penetrate, so they maybe take away one of your attack dice when you go make an attack with one of your weapons or whatever. So that's generally how the game functions. Shout out in the comments below if you want me to make a whole video dedicated to how to make a character. We're going to go over a couple of powers and maybe some of the clans in this video, but we're not going to go too deep of a dive because we want to get through this big monstrosity of a book. But the next thing we're going to go to is the world itself, the world of Vampire the Masquerade. And the first thing you're going to be basically treated with after the table of contents is this. Now, I'm not going to show you every page of this, but this is the beginning lore. And for those of you who play Warhammer 40,000, this is very much like that, where the whole beginning section of the book, a quite fair number of pages, let me just thumb through this here, a fair number of these pages are dedicated to the lore of the world. And not just the lore of the world, but opinions and attitudes of people in the world that are making comments. And I want to harken up to, you have looks like a page out of an old tome that someone wrote maybe back in the 18 or 1600s, different letters from people, and the one thing I wanted to, handwritten letters, and I wanted to get to one specific thing here, if I can find the page, because I would have been smart to dog-ear that page ahead of time. Cool artwork of vampires bleeding out of their eye sockets, because that's what the vampires do, because that's the thing. Here we go. This is effectively a scientific document, a document that someone was doing scientific experiments and figuring out what the hell vampires are. And it's funny because they have these side notes. It appears that a vampire was writing in the margins, commenting on how close or far the person was actually being correct, which is really it's a really interesting thing. My suggestion is, even if you know about the World of Darkness, read through the beginning section of this book. I read through all of it, and man, it is chock with lore, and it really gets you into the sense of the World of Darkness. Now, the interesting thing about this book, now I kind of came out of, now for me, as you said, I played the old version of Vampire the Masquerade, but it was quite a long time ago. And remember, this was back in the 90s, so things like cell phones being on everyone's hip and having cameras all over the place in major metropolitan cities wasn't really common. That was just the beginning of the internet and the beginning of the popularity of the internet, even though the internet's back from the 70s, but whatever. But the internet was just burnishing, into itself. Smartphones weren't really a thing then. Maybe you had a BlackBerry and you can check your email on your phone, and people, oh my God, would you have a beeper? That was that era. Trust me, you don't want to go back to that era. But you have to understand that this era really goes into the idea that everyone has a cell phone. everyone has a high def camera. Cities have cameras all over the place. And how do you as a vampire operate the idea is, this is the Vampire the Masquerade. The idea is, for the most part, you're going to be aligned with an organization that wants to make sure that vampires stay as a myth. They don't want people knowing about it. Yet again, some of those myths about things that vampires are vulnerable to are true. And do you want everyone around you being basically equipped with a piece of kryptonite ready to stuck it in your chest? No. So the idea is that for the most part, the older vampires want to keep things hidden. They want to keep things on the down and not have everyone know that. They effectively think of the movie Blade. The old vampires wanted to keep things the status quo, and the new kind of vampires want to keep things, they're more akin to technology and more akin to changing things. And this is kind of the world you're bringing your character into. Whether you want to be one of these older vampires, to a point, you can't play a really old vampire, but you get some choice there. Or you want to play one of these newer vampires. And even then, there are different sects of vampires. There's the Camarilla, who are the ones that want to keep the masquerade and keep hidden and still operate their dirty business in secret. And you got the Sabbat, which basically it's Deacon Frost, and they think people are food and they should be the highest in the food chain. They also forgot that everyone's walking around with a stake, or whatever. Everyone who knows about vampires can, they have a chance of killing a vampire. Doesn't mean it's easy. But those are the two main groups that are vying for control, and this book goes into the lore of basically the two groups had a big war, and everyone's basically been severely depleted in their resources. And this is now we're talking about an era of, you're in the 2000s, the 2020s, and like I said, cell phones and high technology are very much a thing. And how does your character interact with the old style vampires? How do they treat you? How do you deal with the Sabbat who just want to eat everybody, but they're also trying to rebuild and you're trying to rebuild? And that's really where the deep lore of this game really starts to shine through. As my phone goes to sleep. It's tired. I'm tired. Everyone's tired. There are a variety of clans, the ones that are laid out in this book, and also older clans that may have been destroyed in the coming war that happened. This book does actually go through a lot more of the different clans. Some of the clans, like I said, kind of got eradicated, and some of them basically went into hiding. But it goes through what kind of disciplines that each clan is really good at, and what bonuses they get, and also what they look like, because some of the vampires are messed up, whether in their body or in their mind. The vampire that most people will be very familiar with, which I'm going to get to it in just a second, if I can get the glare off of this thing, are the Nosferatu. These are your physically deformed vampires. These are the ones that you clearly, there's no question, you're a monster. You're 100% a monster. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, but they do have a nice power if you decide to choose it. They get one of their vampiric powers that you can choose is Offuscate, which is basically the controlling and manipulation of shadows. So they're really good at being invisible. They're really good at gathering information because of that. They tend to kind of, especially in cities, they tend to hang out in the slums and the sewers. So they're the kind of the dregs of the vampire society, but they're also very powerful because of all the information. Because remember, they don't just get information on maybe corporations and businesses, but they get information on other vampires and all the other World of Darkness beasts that are out there. Werewolves, they're the information brokers of the world for the most part. But as you see, they are very physically, clearly monsters. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You definitely are some sort of hideous beast, and you need your powers, all your wits about you to stay hidden from the people who don't know vampires are a thing. And the other cool clan that are kind of like not the antithesis of Nosferatu, but they're kind of their polar opposites. The Malkavians. These are my two favorite clans because they're so different. Because you got your Tremors and your Ventrus and your Brujas and I like anarchy. No, you got the Malkavian who, in some regards, are mentally scarred by their conversion to being a vampire, and sometimes people believe, and some Malkavians even believe, that they have the sight into the other world, but that sight can't breach through our world. So this is why sometimes they say crazy things. To them make perfect sense, but for you don't have the sight, so you cannot interpret what they're trying to tell you from the veil. and also tells you the different abilities and archetypes you can pick from the Malkavians. Malkavians look weird just because they like dressing weird, because like I said, they have that, they're more of a mentally affected vampire versus a physically affected vampire like the Nosferatu. And there's a lot of different lore in here. There's, like I said, lore for all the different, you got the Gangrel, more of the animalistic kind of vampires. You got the Bruja, if I can find it. They're the first ones. They're more of their anarchists. There we go. They're kind of the anarchists and mob kind of oriented ones, but you don't have to be, but they're kind of just the flavor that they have. Yeah, you got the Tremere, kind of your weird blood magic spooky caster people. You get your Ventru. And then you have things like Caitiff. Caitiff means young vampire, but there's actually two different kinds of young vampire in this game. But back in the old version of the game, Caitiff was the youngest kind of vampire you could be, and you're basically clanless. Your basically blood was so diluted that you really couldn't be part of a clan. In this one, they kind of describe it as you're so thin-blooded that your clan basically said, get out, we don't want you, or for some reason the traits that you gained from your vampire, obviously if you're sired by Nosferatu, you're most likely going to become a Nosferatu, so your skin's going to be physically deformed and all that stuff, and you're going to gain similar powers that most other Nosferatu have. Sometimes it happens where even an older Caitiff, when they're sired or turned to vampires, they don't gain any traits from their sired vampires, so a lot of times they're shunned for that too. But you have your couple of choices here, and then you have your thin-blooded, which is the really, really young, which wasn't even in the other book. And then they have certain, I mean, this is as close you're going to get to like a daywalker, because you have some abilities that you might be able to operate during the day with this one, but also you take some blood flaws that you have to deal with because you're so thin-blooded. So that's like a crash course into the lore and a little bit of the surface level nature of the clans that you're going to basically experience when you're playing the game. And like I said, you have to remember that you're all basically superpowered blood magic casting vampires, but you also all have pretty significant flaws when it comes to stakes with the heart, sunlight, possibly silver. A lot of things can hurt you as a vampire. Other vampires have magic power. They're effectively powers that could hurt you as well. So you have to be careful. Even though you feel powerful, note that you're also in company of very powerful people. And a lot of times, especially when you're starting out with your vampire, being a younger vampire, the people you might be interacting with are very old vampires, and they may their magic is well beyond yours. You may have a point or two in one or two of your disciplines and your skills, but some of these vampires are hundreds, if not thousands of years old, and they're going to be quite more powerful and have more influence, because you have to understand that it's not just physical or power over yourself that gives you power. It's power over other people. Like Thulsadun has the control of all of his minions, and basically they would do anything for him.
There, on the rocks, that beautiful girl. Come to me, my child.
So in this case, also, the influence matters. The game also has an interesting way of dealing with damage, because you have a willpower stat and you have a hit points stat. And as you take hit point damage, you go down, you get negatives, but you can also take willpower damage. So if you're having a conversation with another high-end vampire and you're having basically a battle of words and authority, and you're trying to throw your effective weight around, your authority around, and someone else has as much or more authority, when you have those back and forth tests and you start failing some of those tests, you could take willpower damage, and even that can kill you. It may not kill you outright, meaning like you're just all of a sudden so wowed that you fall over dead, but the idea is that you may be banished from society, or they may just send their goons out to kill you, and they take you out back and they put the stakes to you. Very deep world when it comes to this, and like I said, right now the Hunter book is out, the Vampire book is out, the Werewolf book is coming out. I believe that the PDF is released, kind of, if you pre-ordered it. I'm hoping that they're going to have more World of Darkness books to have a major interconnected world. Back when they used to have, I mean, it still exists. You probably can run the old books, and there's not too much that changed here. And I'm pretty sure that you probably could run some of this old stuff in the new system. It really goes through the different skills. Let me switch to this. And it also goes through the different skills and what having more pips in a skill really means. As you see here, we have the drive skill. Remember, we are in modern days, so people have cars. You know, having 1 pip, you're a cautious driver, unlikely to make any mistakes. So basically, a 1 pip is your average person driving a car in the modern day. So effectively, regular people probably have a 1 pip in drive. 2, you can put your foot down without much fear of an accident, providing visibility is good. Meaning that you're better and you're pretty good at driving faster as long as you can see what's happening around you. But all of a sudden you start not seeing things, or it's, you know, rough outside, you know, you're going to have a little bit more difficulty. Then you've won car chases. Number 4, you could be a stunt driver. 5, you know the cars inside and out. Few can match your skill. So it really gives you a nice progression of what can be expected of you when you start leveling up these skills. You know, brawling, firearms, craft. It's really all of what larceny, you want to steal stuff, melee, and then there's the social skills and what those represent, you know, having streetwise, you know. And remember, this isn't I will say this is not like an adult game, but you know, it deals with vampires and that kind of world, so there is some reference to drugs and other things, so just make sure you're aware of that. Well, yeah, so streetwise, you know how to score some street stuff. You know, level 2, you know which gangs are in which area. You can kind of, you know, stay clear of them or interact with them in a mild capacity. You can tell the good shit from the bad, score guns, blend in seamlessly with streetwise or, you know, with other gangs. Yeah, and number 4 is when a gangster says, I know a guy, you know who they are. And number 5 is when they say, I know a guy, you are the guy. No, I'm kidding. I have no idea. Subterfuge is the ability of lying, basically bluffing. Then there's the mental skills. And then we have advantages and disadvantages. And let's get to the disciplines. We can find it. It goes into about what feeding on other vampires is, if that's socially acceptable in the vampire world or not. What's the diablerie, effectively eating and killing another vampire, which generally is a no-no, generally, but you have a humanity stat, and the question is, your humanity stat, are you going to try to maintain your humanity, or are you going to give in to the beast? Roar. Here we go. Disciplines, effectively your magic powers. A lot of these cost blood to use to power them up. Let's get to obfuscation. It's one of my favorite ones because I used to play a fortitude. That's toughness. Obfuscate. Here we go. The ability to basically nickname stealth mode, cloaking, veiling. And yeah, so basically you have level 1. You can choose different abilities. So obviously some of the costs are free. Some of the costs require you to make checks. And, you know, silence of death and unseen passage. And as you get more and more powerful, you get access to more and more abilities. So Ghost in the Machine, you can transfer your effects to obfuscate through electric media. So meaning that you can try to stealth yourself from camera and electronic devices, which is awesome since electronic devices are quite prevalent in the modern day. So it makes you blurred, makes identification more difficult. But you have to be level 3 to be able to acquire this power. So if you want to be one of those Nosferatu, or maybe Nosferatu aren't the only ones who have access to obfuscate. There are other clans that do gain a benefit to obfuscate. And over time, and as you gain points for XP, you can spend it on a variety of different things. And then there's a chart on how much XP is required to level up stuff. We're not going to go into that. But as you gain more and more levels, you can get more and more, like basically incredible and supernatural powers when it comes to being a vampire. So being a vampire is really, really cool. I mean, some of the stuff really gets the idea of that, you know, when you have a high level potency, like you're literally ripping off a car door or lifting up an entire car and throwing it at your enemies. Being able to dominate someone's mind, being able to basically be virtually invisible with a high enough obfuscate, being able to move at super fast speeds with celerity. The opportunities for this game to really feel like you're a badass vampire is really cool. But you also have to consider that you're not the only badass out there, and your weaknesses are, you wear them on your sleeve. I'm just going to quickly go over the construction of the book. It's really nice. It's really nice quality hardbound book. They even give you the little page keeper thingy there. The pages are a nice thick kind of semi-gloss paper. I think it will hold up over time, and also can't talk about any one of these RPG books without talking about the artwork. Some of the artwork is very photorealistic, like this one. Then you have really fantastical artwork. Is artwork on almost every page. You get a picture of a rainy street in the middle. It almost looks like Gotham City. Like I said, almost every page. And in the book made a liar out of me. Weird vampires. Yes, blood. Yeah, you got different. Yeah, so just lovely artwork. Like I said, it spans the photorealistic to the stylized when it comes to their art design, which I believe is really awesome. And like I said, you got that beginning part of the book here. Death is not the end; it is the beginning. Like I said, you got those really cool snippets and like almost like pages ripped out of old journals, and then you even have tablets and people who are researching this online and what they maybe found out or what's real and what's not. More tablets and other cool stuff. So I think that, look, if you were into the old World of Darkness, maybe you have some of these old books and you want to get your group back into playing Vampire, and they're into it, I suggest picking up a copy or maybe even just picking up the PDF of this book. There is some resources available online as well. Like I said, if you see 5th edition, don't think that it's going to be D&D. It's not D&D. It has nothing to do with D&D except for the fact that it's a role-playing game. That's really where the similarities end with this game, because it's using entirely different difficulty and dice system. It just used D10s. The character sheet's different. There's no levels in this game. You just get basically a set of points. Some choices in the beginning of the game based on what kind of vampire you want to be, what kind of clan you're from, what kind of disciplines and skills you want. And then you're going to get a pool of points that you can put with your stats. You're going to be able to put it with your skills, some of your disciplines. And then there are some restrictions where you can't go so high at the beginning because, you know, you're still a youngin'. Even if you're the oldest youngin', you're still a youngin' compared to the guy who's 1,000 years old over your shoulder. But yeah, really cool system. If you're really into that more storyteller, narrative story kind of game, this may be an option for your group. Like I said, a little bit of cons because it's more narratively driven and the rules are the rules are solid, but because it's narrative, sometimes the rules are not hard and fast rules like you do see in things like 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder 2nd edition, Call of Cthulhu, a lot of those other games. They are clear-cut rules, and, you know, they are role-playing games, so there is wiggle room, but this is more wiggle room because it is more about telling a story than you just killing a whole bunch of other vampires. But that's just one person's opinion. If you played Vampire the Masquerade, some of the older editions, or maybe you played the new one, send us a comment down below. And if you haven't played it, tell me why you would or wouldn't pick up this book. But this is from Renegade Game Studios. We've been reviewing a lot of their products because they've been coming up with a lot of good books. Transformers, Vampire the Masquerade, Hunter. Actually, I don't think we reviewed it, but Power Rangers, G.I. Joe. They have a lot of good things that are going with them. But yeah, if you're interested in pick up this, I'll leave some links in the things below if you want to check it out. All of our social things will be there too. But this is Steve from Nothing Ventured, Nothing Gamed. May all your die rolls be crits, and may you always roll max damage. See you later.